She was the maid and his long-lost sister. The crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves as Olivia Martinez walked up the cobblestone driveway of the Blackwood estate. The imposing Victorian mansion loomed against the grey Boston sky, its windows like judging eyes watching her approach. She clutched her worn leather purse tighter, feeling the letter of recommendation inside, a small piece of paper that had taken months of networking and pleading to obtain. "You're late," snapped Mrs. Sullivan, the head housekeeper, a woman whose tight silver buns seemed to pull her face into a permanent scowl. "The Blackwoods expect punctuality above all else." "Lo siento. I'm sorry," Olivia corrected herself quickly. 3 years in the United States, and she still slipped into Spanish when nervous. "The bus was delayed." Mrs. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. "The help arrives early enough to account for such inconveniences. Remember that tomorrow." Olivia nodded, swallowing her pride. The $12 per hour this position offered was triple what she made cleaning hotel rooms downtown. Every dollar mattered when her mother's medication in Oaxaca cost more each month. The interior of the mansion was a museum of wealth, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings in gilded frames, Persian rugs that Olivia was instructed never to step on. Mrs. Sullivan led her through the service entrance, drilling her on cleaning protocols with military precision. "The East Wing is off-limits unless specifically requested. Mr. Alexander works from home most days and values his privacy. Mrs. Elizabeth takes breakfast at 9, lunch at noon, and usually retires to her quarters by 3, often indisposed." The euphemism hung in the air. Olivia had worked for enough wealthy families to recognize the careful language of addiction. After a whirlwind tour, Olivia was assigned to cleaning the main floor study. She worked methodically, dusting leather-bound books and polishing the mahogany desk, careful not to disturb the precisely arranged papers. A collection of silver-framed photographs caught her eye. Formal portraits of the Blackwood family through generations. The most recent showed a stern-faced man with a commanding presence, a blonde woman with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes, and a young man with intense features. "That's my father, recently deceased." Olivia startled, nearly dropping the frame. She hadn't heard anyone enter. The young man from the photograph stood in the doorway, though older now, perhaps 30, with shadows under his eyes that the portrait didn't capture. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry. I was just—" "Alexander," he corrected, studying her with unsettling intensity. "My father was Mr. Blackwood." Something in his gaze made Olivia uncomfortable, as if he were trying to place her. She lowered her eyes respectfully, the way her mother had taught her when addressing employers. "You're new." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. First day." He continued to stare, brow furrowed. "Your name?" "Olivia. Olivia Martinez." A flicker of something, recognition, confusion, crossed his face before his expression hardened again. "Martinez? From where?" "Mexico. Oaxaca originally, but I've been in Boston for—" "I didn't ask for your life story," he cut her off, his tone suddenly cold. "Just don't disturb anything on the desk." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Your eyes—" "Sir?" Alexander shook his head. "Nothing. Carry on." Later, as Olivia scrubbed the kitchen floors, she overheard Mrs. Sullivan speaking in hushed tones with the cook. "Acting strange since his father died. The company's in trouble, you know. Rumors about missing funds. And Mrs. Blackwood's drinking worse than ever. Found 3 empty bottles in her suite yesterday." "Geez, hush, walls have ears," Mrs. Sullivan warned, glancing toward Olivia, who pretended not to listen. That night, returning to her tiny apartment in East Boston, Olivia called her mother in Mexico, the connection crackling with distance. "¿Cómo estás, mamá?" she asked, counting the minutes on her calling card. "The same, mija. The doctors want to try a new treatment." Olivia closed her eyes. "I'll send more money next week. I found a better job." "With good people this time?" Olivia thought of Alexander's strange stare, the tension in the mansion, the secrets whispered in corners. "Rich people," she answered carefully. "They're never really good or bad, just complicated." She couldn't explain the strange feeling that had followed her home, that somehow, walking into the Blackwood mansion felt oddly, impossibly, like returning to a place she'd never been. 3 weeks into her employment, Olivia had mastered the rhythms of the Blackwood household. Elizabeth Blackwood rarely emerged before noon, her designer robes concealing trembling hands. Alexander buried himself in his father's study, emerging only for tense business calls. The house itself seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to break. That morning, Olivia was dusting the rarely used formal dining room when raised voices echoed from the study. "The board wants answers, Alexander." It was Richard Whitman, the family lawyer who visited weekly. "These discrepancies in the accounts—" "My father's accounting methods were his own," Alexander responded, his voice tight with restraint. "I'm still sorting through his system. The system appears to include substantial payments to someone in Mexico, continuing for nearly 26 years, the last one just 3 months before his death." Olivia froze, the feather duster suspended in midair. "Mexico?" Alexander's voice sharpened. "What kind of payments?" "That's what's concerning. They're coded as maintenance agreement, but there's no corresponding property or business interest there. It could be perceived as improper." "Are you suggesting my father was involved in something illegal?" "I'm suggesting discretion while we investigate. The last thing the company needs is scandal." Olivia stepped back, accidentally knocking over a crystal figurine. It hit the carpet with a muffled thud. The study door flew open. "Eavesdropping!" Alexander's eyes blazed. "No, sir, I was just cleaning and—" "Get out!" Olivia hurried away, heart pounding. Later, polishing silver in the kitchen, she noticed Elizabeth Blackwood watching her from the doorway, martini in hand despite the early hour. "You," Elizabeth slurred slightly. "New girl, Martinez." "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood?" Elizabeth approached, studying Olivia's face with bloodshot eyes. "Where did you say you're from again?" "Oaxaca, Mexico." Elizabeth's hand trembled, sloshing her drink. "Why here? Why this house?" "The agency sent me. I needed work and—" "The agency?" Elizabeth laughed bitterly. "Of course. How convenient." Before Olivia could respond, Elizabeth grabbed her chin, turning her face toward the light. Olivia stiffened but didn't pull away, afraid of losing her job. "Those eyes," Elizabeth whispered. James always had a weakness for those eyes. She released Olivia abruptly and stalked away, leaving Olivia shaken. That night, she found a small box tucked among her cleaning supplies, an old Polaroid photograph inside showing a younger James Blackwood with his arm around a beautiful Mexican woman whose smile was hauntingly familiar. On the back, 2 words, "Find her." The next day, Alexander cornered her in the hallway. "My mother says you've been asking questions about my father." "No, I haven't, I swear." "Then why were you hired exactly 2 weeks after his funeral? Why does my mother become hysterical at the mention of your name?" "I don't know what you're talking about." His eyes narrowed. "What's your birth date?" The question caught her off guard. "February 17th, 1965. "Why?" Alexander paled visibly. "Who gave you that photograph?" "I found it with my supplies. I thought someone had left it by mistake." "That's my father in Mexico, 1964. His voice hardened. "If you're running some kind of I'm just here to work," Olivia insisted, frustrated tears threatening. "I need this job. My mother is sick." "Your mother?" Something changed in his expression. "What's her name?" "Carmen. Carmen Martinez." Alexander stared at her for a long moment. "The woman in that photo isn't your mother, is she?" "No, I've never seen her before." That evening, Olivia found Alexander in the study, surrounded by papers, his tie loosened, hair disheveled. "You should go home," he said without looking up. It's late. Instead, Olivia closed the door behind her. The woman in the photo, who is she? Alexander met her gaze, his expression unreadable. According to my father's journals, her name was Lucia Diaz. He met her in Oaxaca in 1964. He hesitated. She was pregnant when he left. Rain lashed against the windows of the Blackwood mansion as Olivia sat across from Alexander in the study, the old photograph between them on the desk. Outside, thunder cracked, rattling the glass, nature's percussion for the storm building within. My mother never spoke of my father, Olivia said quietly. When I asked, she would only say he was an American businessman who couldn't stay. I assumed he'd abandoned us. Alexander ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Olivia had noticed he shared with the late James Blackwood in family photographs. According to these journals, my father sent money for 26 years. He didn't abandon you, he bought his way out. The bluntness of his words stung. And your mother, did she know? I don't think so. Not until recently. Alexander flipped through a leather-bound journal. There's an entry from last year. Elizabeth found the transfers. God help me, but some secrets must stay buried. The implications hung in the air between them. Olivia thought of Elizabeth's strange behavior, her drinking, her hostile stares. These DNA tests, Alexander continued, sliding papers across the desk. I had them rushed. 99.8% probability of half-sibling match. Olivia stared at the clinical language that rewrote her entire existence. The room seemed to tilt around her. I have a brother, she whispered, testing the words. And I have a sister, Alexander replied, his voice equally uncertain. Their moment of reckoning was interrupted by the study door flying open. Elizabeth Blackwood stood swaying in the doorway, her silk robe clinging to her thin frame, eyes wild with a mixture of fury and fear. I knew it, she hissed, advancing into the room. The moment you walked through my door with those eyes, his eyes, you think you can just appear after all these years and claim what's ours. Mother, stop, Alexander stood. Olivia didn't know. Liar! Why else would she come here? The timing, right after James dies. Elizabeth's voice cracked. He promised me there would never be any proof. Mrs. Blackwood, Olivia began, I only came here for work. I didn't know about any of this. Elizabeth laughed, a high, brittle sound. Of course, poor innocent maid, just like your mother played innocent while seducing my husband. Don't speak about my mother that way, Olivia snapped, her patience finally breaking. She raised me alone while you lived in luxury. Luxury? Elizabeth's face contorted. You think it was luxury to know my husband kept another family? To smile at charity galas while he wired money to his Mexican mistress? She turned to Alexander. And now you're betraying me too. No one is betraying you, Alexander said, his tone measured. But Olivia is my half-sister, that's a fact. Elizabeth swayed dangerously. She can't be. I won't allow it. It's not something you can disallow, Mother. Elizabeth lunged suddenly, grabbing the DNA results from the desk and tearing them to shreds. There. No proof. That doesn't change anything, Alexander said quietly. Everything changes, Elizabeth screamed. Don't you understand? If she's recognized as James's daughter, she has claim to everything, the company, the estate, everything we've built. Olivia stood, gathering her dignity. I didn't come here for money. Then what do you want? Elizabeth demanded. The question hung in the air. What did she want? Olivia had come to America seeking opportunity, to the Blackwood mansion seeking employment. She'd never sought a brother or a father who'd paid to stay away, or the burden of a legacy built on secrets. I want the truth, she finally said, about who I am, where I come from. Alexander nodded slowly. We both deserve that much. Later that night, as Olivia prepared to leave, Alexander stopped her at the door. Don't come as the maid tomorrow, he said quietly. Come as my sister. Stepping into the rain, Olivia wondered if finding family meant losing herself in the process. The Blackwood family lawyer adjusted his glasses nervously as he looked around the dining room table at the three tense faces before him. 1 month had passed since the revelation, and the autumn leaves had given way to the first dusting of December snow outside the tall windows. "The amended will is quite clear," Richard Whitman explained. James Blackwood acknowledged Olivia as his biological daughter in a codicil signed 6 months before his death. He intended to reveal everything after finalizing certain company transitions, but his sudden heart attack, he cleared his throat. The estate is to be divided equally between his 2 children. Elizabeth's knuckles whitened around her teacup. "This is a mistake. James would never—" "Mrs. Blackwood," the lawyer interrupted gently, "your husband's intentions were explicit. He even mentioned potential challenges you might raise and instructed me to overrule them." Alexander reached across the table, covering his mother's hand with his own. "Mother, this changes nothing about our family." "It changes everything," Elizabeth whispered, but the venom had drained from her voice, leaving only exhaustion. Olivia sat uncomfortably in clothes Alexander had insisted on buying her, a cashmere sweater and wool slacks that cost more than she'd earned in a month. She didn't belong in these clothes, at this table, in this world. "I don't want the money," she said suddenly. 3 heads turned toward her in surprise. "What?" Alexander asked. "I don't want the inheritance. I didn't know James Blackwood. He wasn't my father in any way that matters." Olivia took a deep breath. "But I would like to create a foundation for immigrant families and children with medical needs, in Mexico and here." The lawyer looked bewildered. "Miss Martinez, we're talking about several $1 million. "I understand. The foundation can use it better than I can." Alexander studied her with new respect. "You'd give it all away?" "Not all," Olivia smiled slightly. "My mother's treatments are expensive, and I'd like to finish my education." She'd confessed to Alexander her abandoned dreams of becoming a teacher before financial reality had intervened. Later, as snow began falling in earnest, Olivia found Elizabeth alone in the conservatory, watching the white flakes through the glass ceiling. "Why did you keep working here?" Elizabeth asked without turning. "After you found out. You could have hired lawyers, made demands." Olivia considered the question. "At first, because I still needed the job, then because I wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "The man who could father a child, and then pay to forget her. The woman who spent 26 years afraid of a ghost from Mexico." Olivia moved beside Elizabeth. "The brother I never knew I had." Elizabeth finally turned to her, eyes clear for the first time in weeks. She'd been sober since the lawyer had confirmed the will's contents, as if facing reality required all her faculties. "James loved you," Elizabeth said unexpectedly. "He kept a photo of you as a baby hidden in his desk. I found it years ago, but couldn't bear to confront him." The revelation settled in Olivia's chest, neither healing nor wounding, just another piece of the complicated truth. "I'm leaving the mansion," Olivia said. "Alexander offered to help me find an apartment near the university." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "And the foundation?" "Alexander wants to help with that too. He says it's time the Blackwood name stood for something more than real estate and old money." A small, genuine smile touched Elizabeth's lips. "He sounds like his father. The man I married, not the one he became." As Olivia turned to leave, Elizabeth spoke again. "You have his chin, and his stubborn sense of justice." It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, but it was acknowledgement, the beginning of something honest. That evening, Alexander and Olivia sat in what had been their father's study, now transformed into the headquarters for their foundation planning. The family resemblance was striking in the lamplight, the same determined set of their jaws, the same intensity in their eyes. "To think," Alexander mused, "if you hadn't been assigned to this house by the agency—" "It wasn't the agency," Olivia admitted. I requested this placement specifically. Your father's company was listed in my mother's old papers. I was curious about where he had worked. She smiled ruefully. I never imagined finding a brother. Alexander reached across the desk, taking her hand in a gesture that no longer felt awkward. Family isn't always what we expect it to be. Outside, Boston continued its winter transformation, snow covering the dividing lines between neighborhoods, between worlds that rarely intersected except through service entrances and carefully maintained boundaries. Inside, a new kind of family began to take shape, one built not on secrets kept, but on truths finally spoken aloud. Olivia thought of her mother, who would arrive from Mexico next week for treatment at Boston's best hospital, of the foundation that would help other families separated by borders and circumstance, of the brother who looked at her and saw not the maid, but a reflection of himself. No, she agreed, squeezing his hand. Family is what we make it.